Welcome everybody to this afternoon's community engagement plenary. It's really a great pleasure to introduce this, this community engagement session this afternoon, which is called Change the Record, Exploring Alternative Histories and Heritage with Children and Young People. Children's history conferences have, since their inception, been had sessions which involve young people, showing how they've engaged with children's history in their schooling. And COVID has, of course, made this much more difficult for our conference. But this community engagement plenary is an exciting opportunity, I think, to see and discuss some of the creative work around political and radical education, which has been developed around Greater Manchester. The session has been coordinated by Manchester Histories, an award-winning and unique charity in terms of the work that it does, which is based in Manchester, and its mission is to reveal and celebrate the histories and heritage of our region by working in partnership with a broad range of communities and local organisations, and developing toolkits for people and communities to embark on their own history research. Now, Manchester Histories, as some of you know, has many public engagement projects, including the Biennial Manchester Histories Festival, an important festival in the city's events calendar, and also did a big commemoration of the Peterloo Massacre in 2019. I would urge you to take a look at the Manchester Histories website, where you'll see also highlighted the charity's mission values, which are compassion, curiosity and justice, very appropriate for the era that we live in, I think. I'd urge you to look at the Manchester Histories website, which is manchesterhistories.org.uk. But before then, I'm delighted to hand over to Karen Shannon, our first speaker. Karen is Chief Exec of Manchester Histories. She's steered and expanded Manchester Histories work among local communities in many different creative ways, which include projects with schools and youth groups and developing links with cultural and political organisations like the People's History Museum and the Politics Projects, which we'll also hear about this afternoon. So if I can hand over to you now, Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Melanie, and welcome everyone to this session. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. I wanted to say thanks to Melanie and to the rest of the team and the conference for inviting us here today, and also want to obviously thank you, Naomi, who's been working behind the scenes to bring us this session today, and we'll hear from Naomi in a bit. And obviously our lovely presenters and also Historic England for their support of this event. I hope that you've been enjoying the conference, and over the past few days you've had an insightful and an inspiring time, and that you can take home some maybe new knowledge and understanding about the history of children and young people, and how their voices are heard or not in some cases. So, as Melanie was explaining in this session, I'm going to be sharing with you some insights really into how we told less known stories and alternative histories, and particularly in the making of the Peterloo and Radical Read learning resources, which were produced as part of the Peterloo 2019 programme, with the themes of protest, democracy and freedom of speech. So in this session today, we've got 3 presentations. We were going to have 4, which is obviously on the programme, but unfortunately Reclaim can't be with us today. So you've just got us, which is brilliant. We're also going to be showing a virtual tour, and maybe we'll have a bit of a break as well so we can stretch our legs. And at the end of the session, will be a chance for some discussion, and we'll be putting people in breakout rooms, but we'll explain that as we go along. And also if you've got any questions as we're kind of going along, please put them in the chat. Also in the chat, I have put a link to the Peterloo website as well, which you can browse through as you're looking through this session if you want to. So back to Peterloo 2019 programme. I know that Melanie did mention the Peterloo Massacre in her opening speech, but just in case you did miss that, the Peterloo Massacre is widely acknowledged as a significant event in the history of public protest, of democracy, of universal suffrage and representation, and is part of Manchester's radical tradition. So it's where on the 16th of August in 1819, over 60,000 peaceful and unarmed protesters marched into Manchester to protest for better representation for all. Now, at that time, the authorities who were there on the day had never seen anything like it. They'd never seen a crowd so big, and they got a bit frightened and a bit scared. And after reading the Riot Act at that time, which I think nobody probably heard, they sent in the yeomanry and soldiers to disperse the crowds on that day, killing 18 people and injuring over 700, including women and children. So it really was a moment in Manchester's history where ordinary people really stepped up to protest in what they believed in. And I think that legacy still lives with us today, the beginnings of democracy. However, the Peterloo story was not well known in Manchester. And I think especially with children and young people of today. So we really wanted to change that. So we really embarked on a 4-year journey working alongside children and young people from the very beginning, really. And we wanted to create some resources that were relevant to them from the start. So it included their voices and their ideas. But we also wanted to use creative processes, such as the use of digital technologies, to kind of tell these stories, to engage with young people. And you will see an example of this later in Liz's presentation. This 4-year journey also to make the resources also included a real collaborative approach to develop the Peterloo and the Radical Read resources. We felt it was really important to work alongside others, such as the People's History Museum, the Politics Project, academics, historians, Historic England School Programme, Manchester City Council, Read Manchester, the British Council, and a host of teachers from both primary and secondary schools, with groups as well, such as Reclaim and the Proud Trust and the Manchester Secondary Crew. So together, collectively, these resources were put together, and it was quite a feat, to be honest. It was hard work, organising all these different people. But I think putting all of these elements together, working collectively on this, meant that children and young people were at the centre of what we were trying to do, and that we would produce much richer and more informative resources by working this way, so that teachers working with young people, or people in the community working with young people, could tell the story of Peterloo and how young people responded to that story in an engaging way. So I'm going to now introduce our first speaker, Liz Thorpe, who is the Learning Officer from the People's History Museum. And Liz is going to talk a little bit more about what was done in the resources. And the People's History Museum, just to say, is the National Museum of Democracy, telling the story of its development in Britain, the past, present and future. So I'm going to hand over to Liz now to share her presentation with you. So Liz, over to you.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, so I am from People's History Museum, and as the National Museum of Democracy, We're all about stories and experiences of people just like us, how we've had to work together over the last 200 years to make our lives better. So fighting for the vote, for equality, for social justice. And in 2019, we launched a series of learning resources, which were in partnership with Manchester Histories, and they were co-produced with the Politics Project as well. And as Karen mentioned, this was the 200-year anniversary of the Peterloo Massacre. Wasn't necessarily that well known, even people who were living in the area. And we really wanted to use these resources to help people learn about what happened, and to start considering it not just as a Manchester event, but as something of national significance as well, something that was really important in our country's history of democracy. And we really wanted to use this to think about what the relevance of it today is and why we should still be having that conversation. So to create the resources, we worked closely with schools and with teachers. So with Failinge Park High School in Rochdale and St Thomas Werneth Primary School in Oldham. And we also worked with the young people from Reclaim as well. And it kind of came out of, I guess, 6 months, a year of consultation, working with teachers, because we really wanted to create something that was really simple to use, but was also really adaptable as well, understanding that teachers work in lots of different ways and just something that's useful and not extra work, I guess. And from the consultation, it was decided that an animation would be one of the key resources that we would be launching in the bicentenary year. And this would sort of be a culmination of all those sort of conversations around learning about history and thinking about it today. And all the resources have been proofed and supported with schools and tested as well. So without them, as Karen was mentioning, like collaboration is really at the heart of it and really helps us to create something that's useful and has legacy beyond that year as well. So the animation, which we're going to show you in a few moments, it was created with 12 girls from Reclaim, from the Salford and Manchester groups, with Triple Dot Makers, who were the animators. And we made sure that the group was involved right from the start. So they took part in the application process and actually conducted the interviews. So they selected the animator they wanted to work with. And I guess this was one of the really big successes of the project as well, because that sort of helped them to build a really good, positive relationship, sort of like, something that they could work really closely together on. And I do believe they've worked together since then as well. So there's been a legacy as well, which has been really nice. So what's available for groups and teachers? We've got resources available for Key Stage 2 and 3, so for primary and secondary. And this is a mix of class assemblies and things to do in schools, thinking about things such as what was Peterloo, what is voting, and then sort of developing that and thinking about the impact of protest and how we can create effective campaigns as well. And there's a real mix of sort of conversations and activities to do and sort of videos to watch. So really accessible for lots of people. And you can also have a go at making your own animation as well, which is quite nice. So you'll see as you're watching it, not only do you get a nice overview of the conversation through the video, but it also sort of shows you how they've made the animation as well, which I quite like. So should we play the video now? I'm going to do that.
You want me to do it? Doing it.
Oh yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
We'd marched 30 miles since dawn that morning. Sunrise was scalloped, but we heeded no warning. Our mood was elated, we'd come to make change. From town, from village, from hamlet and grange.
From Atherton, Chadderton, Ashton and Bolton, Saddleworth, Middleton, Cropton and Oldham. From Failsworth, Rochdale, Royton and Elmsted, Whitefield, Stretford, Stockport and Earlham.
And more alongside, we'd organised, drilled, but never expected to see comrades killed. Unarmed, unruly perhaps, but peaceful assembling. Peaceful, adjective, calm, comfort, welcoming.
But we got the opposite: violence, destruction, disaster, designed to remind us who's servant, who's master. 60,000 or more all gathered together to demand rights to vote in fine summer weather.
Our mood of excitement became panic and horror as the cavalry charge sent by men with no honour, hacking the sabres as we ran in pure terror, but couldn't escape. Some dived into cellars. Some died trampled by the stampede. I heard someone beneath me scream, "I can't breathe." In total, 18 were killed, hundreds were injured. The field littered with bodies and flags torn and splintered.
They stripped away humanity, left an empty shell. Disregarded as a nuisance, we were sent to hell. We begged for mercy, but it fell on deaf ears. Distance too great to bear, nothing left but tears.
Our hearts scream of passion, but our voice went unheard. Our fists speak with anger, but our minds undeterred.
After the massacre, they feared mass rebellion, restricted our rights to stop us from telling them. The thing about tyranny we know to be true. It's doomed not to last because we're many, they're few.
Someone once said to make change, you must be it. And though many of us did not get to see it, change did evolve from what we underwent. Our movement sparked Chartists and birthed suffragettes.
Forged unions, brought welfare and national health, and curbed the corruption of those with great wealth. But the price of freedom is to keep constant vigil. Civil rights don't reside with elected officials. We need to maintain them, guard and protect, extend them to those who don't have them yet. The story continues, new age, new chapter. Me Too, Time's Up, Occupy, Black Lives Matter.
It doesn't take judges to send in the cavalry, for some to experience police brutality, and many face daily discrimination. That's why we're still fighting for representation.
We'll fight with knowledge against misinformation. Fight with what's been missed of our education. Fight with the new tools of each generation. Fight with civility against brutalization.
Thank you. So yeah, it's just an amazing animation, and it's really interesting. I think the first bit actually about Peterloo, if you took out reference to specifically Peterloo, it could be like about a lot of contemporary issues that are happening around the world as well, which they sort of come back to later on. And all of it is filmed in Manchester in the spaces where it happened, you know, so an opportunity to come and have a visit to Manchester after and really sort of be in the spaces where you've been learning about is sort of really special. But all of these resources, they're all available online at the Peterloo 1819 website. And then we're in the City Centre as well, so you can always come down and see People's History Museum and have a look at some of our Peterloo collections as well. That's it from me, thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and we hope everyone enjoyed that animation. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's important, you know, again, to show that kind of creativity as well around young people and how they can tell their stories through their own voices. And I think we showed that animation at lots of events as well throughout the Peterloo programme, and it is a powerful piece, I think, and it spread the word of Peterloo, but also of contemporary protests now, like they say in the video, Black Lives Matter and Me Too. So a really important piece of work there, I think. So thank you, Liz. Next up, we have a presentation from Harriet Andrews, and Harriet is the director of the Politics Project, who worked and was a partner and collaborated as well on the Peterloo resources. And the Politics Project specialises in providing people with outstanding democratic education because they believe that everyone should be able to use their voice. So Harriet, it's over to you to give us an insight into your amazing work that you do. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Karen, and thanks for sharing that video, Liz. I always love watching that video. It's great to watch that animation again. So I'm going to share some slides in a second and talk through kind of the process that we used in pulling together the resources. But So it was a project that we ran in 2019 and kind of 2018, 2019 in the run up to the anniversary year in 2019. And we were tasked with kind of supporting the development of some learning resources. So I'm just going to share my screen and kind of talk a little bit through kind of our process and how we kind of approached creating learning resources about Peterloo. So I'll just share. There you go. Oh, there you go. Got to the right bit. Great, fantastic. There we go, perfect. Fantastic. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the Peterloo project itself and kind of the process that we use it for. But we actually continue to use the Peterloo resources now in a couple of our other programs. So I'm just going to end by talking about kind of the legacy of Peterloo for us and how we've gone on to use those resources. So in terms of the resources that we ended up creating, we created 3 different schemes of work. So one for primary schools, one for citizenship, to go into GCSE citizenship, and one to go into history. And that's really where we started, was that we really wanted to make sure we looked at Peterloo and looked at what kind of lessons and stories it could tell, and really wanted to identify how can we mainstream it into education. And that was a really important part of it, because we wanted these resources to have as much reach as they possibly could, so that they could engage with as many students as possible. And something that we've seen since, which has been really nice about these resources, is that they're not just being used by schools in Manchester, they're being used across the country. And that's something that we were really keen to achieve, was to make sure that it can really align with those different subjects. So there is some overlap between the 3 different kind of streams of resources that we've got, but they're really aligned to really hit some certain learning outcomes that are in primary, that are in citizenship, and that are in history, so that we can make sure that they get used in as many lessons as possible. And just before I start, I think for us it was just an absolute pleasure to work on this project, because it was part of that kind of collaboration that Karen and Liz both mentioned, that we had so many kind of rich resources that we could draw on. So we were really keen to use some of the artifacts from the PHM in kind of designing the resources and pulling in different ideas. Things like the animation were fantastic, but it was just like it was a fantastic kind of project to work on for that reason. So where we started with this project is kind of, I guess, taking a step back, so approaching things the way that we approach a lot of our other work. And we started with one of the things we wanted these resources to achieve was, obviously we wanted young people to understand a bit more about Peterloo. But I think importantly for us, we are always looking for our resources and the work that we do to lead to young people feeling more able to engage in democracy and feeling that they can get involved in democracy now and how they engage with it now. So I just wanted to start by kind of outlining what we think are the 3 main ingredients that you need, that a young person needs, anybody needs, to feel like they can engage in democracy. So the first one is political knowledge, and understand a bit about how some of the systems and structures work, but also about some of the social issues, to be able to properly engage in politics and in democracy. The second one is around speaking and listening and critical thinking. So we do a lot of work on this idea of oracy, so helping young people to use their voice and to speak and to have that confidence. So if you don't have those kind of skills, then it's really difficult for you to kind of meaningfully engage in democracy. And then the final one is the one that I think is in some ways is most relevant for this project, something we really, really focused on. But it's about what's your relationship like with some of the institutions and with kind of democracy more broadly. So what are your previous experiences? What are your attitudes towards politics? Have you had a really bad experience of politics, or do you have a really bad impression of politics and feel like, even if you know about it, even if you've got those skills, I'm not going to engage in politics, it's not for me, it's not something that I want to do something about. And as an organisation, I guess that final one is what we spend a lot of time thinking about, because we do a lot of work on political trust and how we can increase political trust. So I'll talk a little bit as I talk about the resources, about how that was something we were really keen to do. Was we kind of started at that point of how do we make sure that this is going to lead to, how do we get the right mix of those 3 ingredients to make sure that we get to that political engagement from young people. So the first question that we always ask on any project, and we definitely asked it on this project, is why should I engage in politics? If you think about a young person who is engaging in these resources in Peterloo, so we were dealing with an event that happened 200 years ago, and we really wanted young people to feel that it was something that was relevant to them, and that it was something that they could get involved in, and that they could see some connections between them and their lives. So one thing that we really tried to push the whole way through is making that that connection. How do we engage them in politics? So I'm just going to talk through a couple of the ways that we really pushed to make sure that young people could feel like, although we were talking about something that happened 200 years ago, we could pull it out and make it relevant to young people today. So I'm just going to pull out a few different examples now from this is all from the citizenship curriculum. So in the citizenship scheme of work has 3 different lessons in it. And the first lesson is all about kind of understanding and using Peterloo as a kind of understanding protest and understanding different kind of pressure groups and campaign groups, so introducing the idea of protest. The second lesson was all about really understanding Peterloo itself, really getting into the kind of the nuts and bolts of kind of what happened and what happened into the various people that took part, that were there that day. And then the third session is really about that idea of understanding what makes an effective protest. How could you pick up some skills? What can you learn from Peterloo as a protest, as an idea that you could potentially then draw parallels with things that happen today? And going back to that question again about kind of why should you engage, one thing we're really keen to do is what we call person-centered political education. So we want to, it's a fancy way of saying you've got to make it relevant to the people that you're talking to. So you've got to always bring it back to their experiences, their lives, and make it feel really, really accessible. So I'm just going to pull out a few examples now of where we've really pushed to try to do that. So this is at the end of that first lesson that was all about exploring and understanding protest. Was one of the things that we wanted young people to kind of do, is get a chance at that point to understand how they could create a Peterloo, the My Peterloo campaign, how they could do a small protest themselves, and really asking that question of young people: what would you protest about? What are your issues? What is it that you care about? So really hopefully creating a link between some of the issues that are happening today and are happening in young people's lives to things that obviously happened 200 years ago, and how you can kind of link the past. Of one of the ways that we really tried to create that link. In the second session, we actually end that second session. So we do, most of the session is really looking at what happened in Peterloo and kind of using a lot of the fantastic resources and animations to really explore what happened on the day. But again, at the end of that session, we want to bring it back. So we do a little bit of time exploring Votes at 16 and thinking about that, what's a kind of modern suffrage movement that looks like. And obviously Votes at 16, incredibly topical. This year was the first year that Wales had Votes at 16 in any of their elections. So it's a really live conversation that's going on in the UK today. So instead of, we felt it was really useful, instead of thinking about suffrage as something that how can you learn from actually those suffrage conversations to bring forward to modern suffrage conversations. And then the final session that we looked at was all about helping young people to evaluate and look at what makes an effective campaign, what makes an effective protest. And for this, we've kind of created a bank of case studies as part of that. This is one of them, where there were kind of examples of modern protests, modern things that are really led by young people, that the young people could look at and kind of start to evaluate and think, oh, I really like what they've done there. And again, as Liz said, bringing in that creativity and hopefully helping to make kind of the idea of protest something that's kind of closer to young people, something that they could engage with if they wanted to, instead of being something that was kind of far away and academic. Great, fantastic. Sorry, I'm just going to skip back to this slide. So that's a little bit about the Peterloo resources and the protest, the process that we used for those. I'm just going to talk quickly about how that now fits into our current work, because there's opportunities for, if anybody wants to work with us and use the Peterloo resources, we're still supporting schools and other organisations to use the Peterloo resources. So I'll just talk a little bit about that. So I'll start here. So at the core of a lot of our work, we do a lot of work on political trust and political engagements. So we run a programme called Digital Surgeries, which is all about, you can see digital surgery taking place there, which is all about building the relationship between young people and politicians. And we've got a version of this programme, Digital Surgeries Peterloo, that uses the Peterloo resources to support and prepare young people for a conversation with a politician. So they can do all that thinking about protest, do all that thinking about Peterloo, and then they can have a conversation with a politician that represents them today, so they can discuss some of those issues today. And we've got a few we work with about 200 schools across the UK now to run that project, and we work with about 180 politicians, so there's those opportunities to get involved in that. And these are just some of the projects we've run recently. So we Digital Surgeries is the main project, but we also now we just ran a big digital hustings event in Manchester for the mayoral elections. And we also do a lot of work with select committees now. So we support young people to give evidence to select committees. And again, it's all about going back. Our driving force with all of this in terms of the design of these sessions is about those three things you want to hit: those knowledge, skills, and those attitudes and experiences. And in many ways, the Peterloo resources use that same process, so that by the time you've got to the end of those Peterloo resources, you should feel more able as a young person to engage in democracy and to engage in politics. So you can kind of follow that process through. I'm just going to end by showing you a video to kind of, I guess, put some of this to practice, of just a clip of one of the digital surgeries that we ran with Andy Burnham. It was a couple of years ago now, but some of the students that took part had used some of the Peterloo resources in that project. And I think one thing to say about digital surgeries is that it's a lot about building trust and building relationships, dealing with that third thing about improving attitudes and experiences for young people. So it's easier to show you than to tell you what it looks like to design programs so that they can build trust and relationships. So I'll just go back to here, and I should be able to share my sound. Let me know if you can't hear this.
I don't think we can hear anything, Harriet.
Very laggy.
Oh, can you hear it? Are you struggling to hear it?
Yes.
We're struggling to hear anything, I'm afraid.
Okay, let me just see if it's me not showing my sound. Yeah, there we go. I wasn't showing my sound. There we go. Okay, just take it back a little bit. Please. Is that better? Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Let me know if you can't hear.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't it a personal question, or how do you propose to your life?
How did I propose? Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Now this is...
I think Harriet...
I don't know if I should...
It's lagging a lot. There's not
not
a very clear connection. We can't
say this, but now you've asked me, I'm going to have to, aren't I? So...
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'll just go back to the slides then.
Yeah.
That's just, well, it's a shame because it's a nice video. It's the time a student asked Andy Burnham how he proposed to his wife, and it turns out that she was pregnant, and that's why they got married. So yeah, it's just a nice moment. But yeah, if you can't watch it, then that's fine. So yeah, I guess that's the end of our presentation, but there's opportunities if you want to get in touch with us about delivering the Peterloo resources, and then the final session of that being an engagement with a local politician. We do that with quite a lot of Manchester schools, and there's that opportunity to work on that. You can visit the website to view all of the learning resources in a little bit more detail. So we do have those 3 tracts: the citizenship, the history, and the primary. So if you're a teacher or you're interested in education, then I'd recommend having a look at them. And like I said, we had so much kind of rich content to work with, that is just it kind of really, for me, does kind of sum up the power of collaboration in terms of being able to bring in all of those different resources from different places to create some really exciting schemes of work. So I'll pass back to Karen now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hattie, for that. Again, hopefully everyone enjoyed listening to the kind of, the kind of way that the Peterloo resources were created, really. And also, if you didn't know who Andy Burnham is, he's the mayor of Greater Manchester. So I'm sure that's on YouTube, isn't it? Anyway, Hattie, that video, if people want to go and watch it, then please do. Next, I'm just going to carry on because I'm just wary of time. I'm just going to go back to Liz now, who is going to just share with us about an exhibition that's happening right now at People's History Museum, and it's called More in Common in memory of Jo Cox. So, Liz, I'm just going to go straight back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hattie. I'm so glad you told us what the answer was then, because otherwise that's all I would have been thinking about for the next hour and a half during this. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. Yes, we've currently got an exhibition on at the museum, and I wanted to show you some of the highlights from that. It's running until April next year if you are able to get down, and we also have an online version if you can't, so I'll share details in a moment. So More in Common in memory of Jo Cox is it's an exhibition that showcases the work of a community project that we've been doing over the last few years called More in Common, and it's inspired by the life and legacy of MP Jo Cox, who was murdered in 2016. And the exhibition, it's broken down to explore Jo, and you can find out a little bit more about who Jo was. And what her legacy is, so what has actually happened since her death. And a lot of that space is then dedicated to the project and looking at the different ways that we've explored her legacy around this idea of more in common. We're hoping from September that we'll be able to invite groups back to the museum, so we're not doing at the moment just individual visitors. But it's got some really great citizenship and British value links. I think it's a really powerful exhibition to bring a school or a youth group down to. And one thing I would say is that it is a really emotional exhibition. Being in that space, it is quite, it can be quite upsetting. It can be quite happy. There's a real mixture of emotions around the conversations in there. We don't go into any detail about her murder, which we've done on purpose, but some people may still find that quite triggering or quite upsetting. But hopefully, I'm going to show you a few resources we've got, and you'll see that actually what the exhibition is how sad feelings can inspire positive change and how something positive can come out of this tragedy. So it is suitable for all people, for all ages, I should say, and we do have resources to help younger children as well. So who is Jo Cox? So you can see a range of objects we've got from the exhibition here, and these have everything's been launched from the Cox family, I should say. And Jo, who you can see in the bottom right corner, she grew up in Yorkshire. She's a proud Yorkshire lass. from a working class family. She was the first one to go to university. And while she was at university, she actually she felt quite lonely herself. She had experiences of loneliness and sort of settling in to a new environment. And this really helped her future work that she did as an MP. She worked tirelessly as a campaigner and a humanitarian, and she travelled around the world with her job, helping others, particularly those affected by conflicts, such as in Syria. And she said, what all that experience gave me is if you ignore a problem, it just gets worse. And so that really gives you an idea about where, you know, her sort of motivation comes from with her work. In 2015, she was elected as the Labour MP for Batley and Spen, which was her dream job, representing her home constituency. And she was really passionate about education, tackling loneliness, and bringing communities together. And she really believed that communities were enhanced by immigration. And you can see in the top right-hand corner here, this is what is now quite a famous quote. So this was her maiden speech to Parliament, and she said, "We have far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us." And you can see where we've got the inspiration for the project from that quote. So as well as, you know, a passionate worker and campaigner, she was a mother, a wife, a daughter and a sister. And a lot of the objects, as I mentioned, have been on loan from her family and really helped sort of to show that other side of Jo. You know, we've got up in the top corner here this hat that she always wore when they went for their hikes as a family, and her and her husband and her family were actually completing a challenge to climb some of the highest mountains in Scotland. It's a challenge that her family are still continuing in her honour, and they take the hat up every time they go to complete the next step of the challenge. So this hat, for example, is on display now, but it will be regularly coming off display so that they can continue doing that during this next year. We've also got a few ways in which people are remembering Jo down here. So she worked a lot, as I mentioned, in education, and you can see just one example of some of the work that was created by local schools in Batley to remember Jo after she was killed. And in the centre, we've got a coat of arms which was created by her family using sort of symbols and colours that best reflect her and her values. So on the 16th of June 2016, Jo was attacked and she was murdered during the Brexit campaign, the run-up to the referendum. She was murdered on her way to one of her constituency surgeries. And what you can see here is the sort of, I guess, the main feature of the exhibition, which is the memorial wall, which was outside Parliament immediately after her death, for people to leave messages and for other people and for Jo. So I've just selected a few from there for you to have a look at. Her husband, Brendan Cox, he said immediately after the attack, he said, "An act driven by hatred, which instead created an outpouring of love." And I think that really sort of beautifully sums up, you know, this something that was tragic and really upsetting. Actually, the response, people didn't respond with hatred, which was, you know, this was supposed to divide communities, and it didn't. It's actually brought people together, and that legacy is really powerful. And a week after, on her birthday, there's some really lovely photos in the exhibition of a more in common vigil that was held to remember Jo and show solidarity for more in common. And so then you can see on this slide here, we're thinking about the legacy and what impact has Jo had and continues to have. And that leads us on to our more in common group. So way back a few years ago now, we posed the question, do you believe we can live together in a multicultural society without labels? And people from across Greater Manchester came together to meet other people and to celebrate this idea of more in common. And while we set up the group, we very much left the group then to run it themselves, so that it really felt like their space and their ideas could shine through. And they came up with 10 collective values, which they continue to work to through More in Common. And it's to make sure that they're creating an inclusive, a respectful and a welcoming space for others. And as lockdown hit everybody, this group then carried on online, and just because of the logistics of meeting online, they actually split into 4 different groups. I think there was about 30 people overall. They split into smaller groups and together sort of went off on their own paths, exploring this idea of bringing people together and celebrating what we have in common as much as our differences. And these photos are some examples of the work which you can see looking around the exhibition. So they explored More in Common through creative writing, through textiles, through photography and through conversation. And that's a lot of what the exhibition is made up of. So while you're visiting the exhibition, we do have a range of resources to support your visit. So the first one, which you can see here, is a self-led sheet, and it's to encourage people to talk about how they're feeling, and also to give us opportunity to sort of really hone in ourselves on, you know, how we're feeling as we're moving around the space. And we're encouraging people to talk about, you know, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you feeling more than one thing at once? You know, how does that change as you're going around? You know, really encouraging people to have these conversations from the youngest to the oldest. And alongside this, we have a self-led trail, which is great for families, but can be used for all ages. And that's really encouraging or supporting, I should say, adults to have conversations with children and young people around the topics in the exhibition. So as I mentioned at the start, thinking about how sad feelings, you know, they can inspire positive actions, and that legacy is something positive. But really try not to shy away from you know, the grief and loss that people might be feeling as they're going around. In particular, thinking this last year, you know, with lockdown and everything that's happened, nobody's really escaped that, and everybody in their own way will be feeling, you know, isolated, lonely, might be feeling upset, might have lost somebody. And these are themes that come out in the exhibition, actually. And so we wanted to make sure that we were supporting people who might be experiencing something in one way or another as they're going around the space. To complement these as well, we're also just working on some group leader notes, which will just help you to prepare for the visit. These should be available from September on the website. And it will also just go into a little bit more detail about what those triggers might be as you're going around the space, and how best to prepare your students or your group, so that they feel sort of comfortable while they're here, as well as some really simple activities that can just help have like a calming or a grounding effect as well. So just some simple techniques that can help you as you're looking around the space. You'll also find in the group leader notes some ideas for activities that you could do while you're in the space, or inspired by the exhibition when you're back at school or in your organisation, so that some of these creative projects that have come out of the legacy, you know, they can inspire some of your work back with the group as well. And then finally, we also do have an online exhibition for those who can't come to the museum or are feeling quite comfortable to, which is completely understandable. So I'm just going to quickly stop sharing this presentation and just quickly show you the website so you can have a look. I will also put it into the chat as well. Here we go. So here we have a dedicated web page which has all of the content which is in the gallery. This is the first time we've done this. This is us experimenting with digital, as most people are this year. and you can go through the different themes. So you might find this interesting if you can't get down to the space, or if you're just wanting to help prepare or reflect on the exhibition, if you are doing as well. So you can have a look in more closely at some of the objects that are here. And we also have a digital wall of hope. So inspired by the memorial wall, which was left outside Parliament and is in the exhibition space, we've also created an online space for people to continue adding those messages for other people and for Jo as well. So you can do this with your group as well while you're with us. So the exhibition is open till April next year. If anybody's got any questions, have a look on the website. Do sort of leave me a message in the chat while we're here as well. But I think this is a really nice example to share today. We've looked at Peterloo and we're talking about the importance and the relevance today. And a lot of the work that we do is looking at what's been happening in contemporary society and encouraging people, as Hattie was saying, to, encouraging people to talk and to listen and to think critically is really important. And a space like this can be a really nice way to start those conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz, for sharing that with us. A very important exhibition, I think, and if people can get the opportunity to go down, please do. I had the joy of meeting Jo in Batley actually once when I was working up there, and an amazing woman, and it's so great that you're able to do something in her memory, really, and include people in that kind of, I suppose, collective mourning, and also but also that positive element of it as well. So thanks very much for sharing that. We're going to have a little break now for people, just for 5 minutes before. So welcome back, everybody, to the session. We're going to go next to have a presentation from Naomi Whitman, who is a creative producer at Manchester Histories, and who worked on the development and the delivery of the Radical Read learning resources, which ran alongside the sort of Peterloo learning resources, and was supported through Read Manchester. Was about trying to get children and young people to read and take part in looking at radical literature, really. So Naomi, Manchester Histories worked alongside Manchester Read to produce a series again of different learning resources for children and young people around protests. So I'm going to hand over now to Naomi to talk us through that amazing project, Radical Read. So over to you, Naomi.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen as well, so I'll just get that up. That's not even on the one. Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. Yeah, so as Karen said, we developed Radical Read really with Manchester City Council with their Read Manchester programme, and it was primarily initially funded by the British Council. So we'll see a little bit more about that. Oh, what have I done with my... Oh, there we go. Can you see the screen okay? Hope so.
Yes.
So yeah, Radical Read was, as Karen said, again, it was it ran in 2019, and it formed part of the 2019 the Peterloo 1819 commemoration programme. It was developed with a number of partners and stakeholders to produce and curate what went in it, which resources, which themes went in it. And the way that we worked it was, it was whittled then down into these 15 separate themes. So the project as a whole, was had a number of strands, and the first sort of main one was this secondary and post-16 teaching resource, which had 15 separate themes and focuses on individual protest and movements that young people had been involved in. So I guess that was the slight difference in looking at how children and young people have been involved in protest and movements in the last 200 years. So from Peterloo right up to modern day. So trying to make protest and radical history really relevant to children and young people. So looking at children's history of that. So hopefully this will work. It'll take me through to this link. Can you see that now? Or can you still see my presentation? I think I need to share the new one. Yeah, so this is on the Peterloo website. The Radical Read resource has been published on there. There's also a shortened down version on the British Council Learning website as well, for your information. So it provides the guidance document of how to use it, and then each of the 15 themes is broken down. So obviously it starts with Peterloo, but then there's a number of 14 other themes as well. I'll just take you down through all of them so you can see them all. Obviously these were done a year and a half ago, so some of the content has aged, so that would be worth bearing in mind if you're using it to maybe, obviously quite a lot of it can come off the shelf, but some elements of it may want updating. So I'll go into Occupy, for example. So you can go in to find out more, and then it gives you a brief overview, and then there's teacher notes and worksheets, and then the slides. So each of them have got a really helpful tools there. I'm not going to open it because I think it's going to mean that I'm going to have to re-screen share. But each of the resources includes reading activities, drama performances and activities, writing, free writing, placard making, and a range of other activities to allow young people to choose and to express themselves in the way that they feel most comfortable, so leading to them gaining a deeper understanding of what the issues are being presented, and just really exploring those issues presented through creative means such as performing or drawing allows participants to confront some of those slightly more uncomfortable issues in a safe and supportive environment. So it just gives them the opportunity to really dig into those different topics. Yeah, so that's that there, sorry. Let me come back and share on this another one here. So yeah, that's the main resource there. So the resource was the primary focus really, but we also went on to we also started the project with a writing competition where we requested for young Manchester-based writers to submit a short story or poem from the perspective of a young person who might be an eyewitness to Peterloo, because we recognised that there weren't many historical artifacts or writings from a young person's perspective. So we thought we'd ask people to make one up. So that's what we did. So that's what the competition was about, and something that we could have a piece of reading material in that in that resource. So the winning entries were then produced into an anthology, which was illustrated by 2 young women from Loretto High School in Manchester. So they were year 10s. And the winning story was then published on the Radical Read resource, but she also went on to perform her story at the commemoration event on the 16th of August. So she got quite a lot of accolade and recognition for her brilliant creative work. So I'll go through now to show you the anthology, just because it's a really nice piece of work to show you. Here we go. I've also got a real life copy as well, so I'll show you that in a moment. So we do have quite a few physical anthologies left. So if anyone wants one, please just comment in the comments box and we can try and send one out to you. If it's UK based, I'll have to double check with the postage for international. So there you are. There's just loads of beautiful illustrations there that the 2 young women did. That's it in its physical form. Obviously it's back to front for you, but that just gives you a sense of, oh, that's very clever of me opening up the same one. So they worked alongside an artist called Rose Sergeant to create those illustrations, and they used the stories that were written to inspire the work that they were producing. So they used lots of different mediums to produce these illustrations. So beautiful. So I'll go back to showing the presentation. And then the next phase of the project was a creative program. We worked with 6 groups of young people from across Manchester. So those are listed there. They each chose a topic or theme from the resource pack. So they explored that through a medium or creative expression of their choice. So some chose music, some chose theatre, card making, that sort of thing. And we wanted to get a broad range of young people from across Manchester to really work with the resource pack in their own way and with their own ideas. So we had a little bit of funding from the Arts Council and Heritage Fund to support those programmes, and they produced some really beautiful work. One of the groups was the Manchester Prue, and it was the post-PLAS group, so it was post-placement, that's what it stands for. So it's young people that have entered into the school year too late to get a placement in a mainstream school. So primarily the young people that were involved in that project had come from other countries, so they'd come and they'd experienced protests and war in some instances. So they created a sound installation and these banners, and 4 banners actually, but this is just a picture of 2 of them. So they created the soundscape that I'm about to play some of it to you with Youssef Rabati, and the banners were made with Sally Guilford. So they used all these different creative mediums to express themselves and explore the themes of the radical read. Sorry. Soundscape's disappeared, but I've got it somewhere else. So if you just bear with me one moment, I'll find it. Sorry about that. You'll have to close your eyes and listen to it rather than looking at my face. If you could just let me know if you can hear that.
My GCSE does not define me. Fake news is something we should never eat.
We are the younger generation. Let's be proud of our skin complexion.
No more cigarette, no more regret.
Stop using guns to like to run our lives.
Education is key, so why? No more forests. Throw them in the forest.
Protest looks like violence and massacre.
Protests look like tornadoes of people that need to be heard.
Misery is how it looks like.
Protest looks like crowds gathering. It smells like sweat and anger. It feels sad like funerals, but also powerful like passion. Protest tastes bitter like alcohol. Sounds like a gunshot echoing, but it's the only hope we have.
Protest smells like cigarette smoke choking us.
Protest smells like burning ashes.
Protest smells like heart burning. My heart has just been set ablaze.
Protests look like tornadoes of people that need to be heard, but the sound of sadness, rage, and despair overwhelm them. Protests taste like tears, salty and sour like their souls. The petrichor scent.
Right, I have to leave it there, sorry, because I know we're short on time. So that, yeah, it goes on for about 7 minutes. So it's very emotive soundscape that they produced. It's yeah, really moving. So that's what one of the groups produced, and others produced other things. So to start the programme, a number of the young people went and saw a theatre piece by a Brazilian company around the school occupation as well. So that was a really nice way of sort of kick-starting the project. And then finally, or not quite finally, nearly finally, we celebrated the project at an event in July 2019, which was a celebration event at the Manchester Art Gallery, just bringing together those groups and other young people across Greater Manchester to invite them to explore the themes again of Peterloo and freedom of speech, democracy and protest. So they shared their performances and their outcomes of their projects, but also discussed protest and what that meant for them today. Donna Shepard was one of the people on the steering group. She was actually asked to present. I'm sort of stolen her presentation because she's on maternity leave, but she wrote some thoughts for herself for me to share today. And she said that although many of the historical events detailed in the radical resource are discussed in schools and colleges informally, many students did comment that they were not part of their curriculum. So the realisation that these important events are not routinely studied in schools raised additional discussion and debate amongst the groups of young people participating. And through Donna's involvement, so through my involvement in the development of the resource pack and delivering the sessions to a range of groups of young people, I was able to understand the need for this type of education to be present in schools and colleges. The young people brought their own experiences of protest and how they had been personally affected by some of the issues presented to the sessions, and appreciated the opportunity to explore their point of view and to learn from each other. So I think that's really key, isn't it? That although these aren't taught formally, there's ways of it being taught informally, but also the importance of advocating for it to be taught more widely and more structurally, I suppose. And that's it really, that's Radical Read and how it went about. We also, the final little part of it was that they received, all the schools in Greater Manchester received a soapbox of books to carry on their reading and to really encourage them to read into some of the themes and the protests that are mentioned within the resource. So that's it from me, thank you.
Great, thank you Naomi, brilliant. So we've got about 10 minutes now just to go into sort of breakout rooms. There's going to be 3, and if you can sort of choose your, they're all going to be the same breakout rooms. We're going to have just smaller discussions in those groups. And we've got three breakout rooms that you can pick. So if you'd like to just select one, and you'll have to organise yourselves, I'm afraid, on this one. So we should get about maybe 6 or 7 or 8 people in each one, and if there's any people left over, just go in, and we've got some questions that we'd like to ask, or if conversations want to take their own way as well, that's perfectly fine. So we'll just move on to that because I'm just aware that we haven't got much time left. So if you go to your breakout rooms, and then you can join in.
Karen, do we need to decide who's going in which one for us?
Well, people, yeah, I mean,
so Harriet, Patty's gone into 1 and Liz has gone into 2. Shall I go into 3?
Yeah.
And are you going into 4, or we're just doing the 3?
Yeah. Okay. To see.
Hi, Karen. I'm not sure if everybody's moving, actually. We've got several people who haven't moved yet. If you haven't moved, we'd be grateful if you could get yourself into a breakout room.
Sorry, Karen. I'm Isaac Larison. I cannot see on my screen where to go into the breakout rooms.
Or if you go down to the bottom, it's Melanie here. If you go down to the bottom of your Zoom and look at share screen and then recording, there should be a breakout room there. Otherwise, I think I might be able to move you into
that would be helpful because I don't have that button.
Okay. Liam, are you there?
Yes, I can send you to whichever breakout room that you like.
Whichever one doesn't have very many people. It will be one.
I'll send in, right, room 3, off you go.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. Anybody else who can't get into a breakout room and would like a little bit of help? Either Susan or Hong or Vasiliki? I don't know, maybe they're, or Judith? Maybe people have decided not to. Thanks, Liam.
No worries. Do you want me to close them in 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Just leave them open, but maybe send a reminder that there's a whole group session that's going to start. I think, how are we? We've got to finish at, we need, yeah, I think if you could send a reminder, say, you need to stop discussing, you know, please move back to the main session. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can send a message out. Yeah, so I'll send, shall I send a message out at, about 5 minutes?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, no problem.
Say that they're running out of time, so we've got to finish at 2. That'll take us around to 23, and that'll give. I think we'll probably go over a wee bit, but that doesn't matter.
That's no problem. Well, the gap between it'll take me 5 seconds to be able to recreate the next.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, because I can't. What have we got next? We've got. Oh, it's not until 3:45, so we're fine. We could go over a little bit. That'll be fine.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks, Liam. That's brilliant. Thank you. I think we're still recording. We don't need to at the moment.
I think people are coming back now. Are you there, Melanie? I think everyone's kind of come back now. If they can't see Naomi yet. And I think Melanie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Keep doing that. Harriet, Margaret, Miranda, and Simon look as though they're still carrying on with their discussion. I'll go back in and see if I can drag them out.
They'll be back.
Oh, they're back. They're back. Are they back?
Space.
Simon.
Okay. So are we meant to be finishing at 2:30, Melanie? Is that correct?
I think we can go on for another 5 minutes. We've got another session that starts at 3:45, but I wouldn't want to just kind of it all to vanish. So, you know, if people have got questions or very quickly want to make a comment, I think that would be also very useful for Manchester Histories, wouldn't it? So
yeah, what we thought we would do is just, if each group want to sort of like feedback on any sort of key comments or reflections, observations or things that they talked about, we can just write it on this whiteboard here and just keep it, because it would just be quite nice to know what people, what people did think and anything, around the questions. So if we just go to group 1 first, and if anybody wants to just tell us about any reflections or any comments or observations that they would like to make.
I can go because I took some notes from group 1. So I think quickly, just to go through them quickly, a couple of things that we discussed that I think were really interesting. So one was that kind of how much we talked about in the resources and design of resources of linking the working kind of from the present and then going back to the past, and that really strong link between the past and the present and how powerful that could be. We were also talking about kind of international education and how you can kind of find interest to learn about other countries, things like this that have happened in other countries, and how you can kind of create that narrative around kind of things being international. And then the other thing was about the power of kind of understanding some of these stories through a single person's experience. So, that kind of following a single narrative, following what happened to the individuals that happened at Peterloo, and we were talking about that that kind of power of kind of really being really effective. So yeah, they were some of the quick things I wanted to say from group 1.
Lovely, thank you very much. Group 2, I think, Liz, were you in that group, or anyone from that group have any things that they'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I can talk for group 2. I think the main things that we were talking about was how the range of the different resources was sort of quite exciting and inspiring. So, you know, lots of different ways in to look at this kind of history, and it's quite powerful to be thinking about that continuing legacy for something that happened so long ago, but making those connections through history. And the importance of establishing connections with networks and, you know, working together, collaboration. And then we did just start talking about whether what's missing, and that, you know, with teaching at the moment, and talked about sort of the gaps that there are, you know, in the sort of the more traditional curriculum, and some things are quite structural and have been overdone, and the students can be as tired of it as the teachers can be. So finding sort of new and exciting case studies, and the importance of a local connection came up as well, and how that can really bring it to life, especially if you talk about it in the context of a wider national movement, finding those local ones. So for Peterloo, for the Manchester, you know, like young people, and being able to be in that space, go and visit it, how that can really sort of build a connection, like how powerful that is.
Great, thank you, Liz. And group 3, I know Naomi's writing, so Mary Claire, could you feedback on that group, please? Because you were in that group, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for the session, and we all enjoyed it. A lot of our session we were talking about sort of questions. So one was about access to young people in schools, because, you know, quite often researchers find it hard to be allowed to get into do anything that's not on the national curriculum. There was a question about access to books, and Isaac, who's based in West Virginia, was talking about very poor resourcing for books in schools. So they're paid for by the British Council, I gather. And we also asked about young people's responses. And Claire was involved in, is judging the right word, looking at the competition entries, and Claire Robinson, and she was very impressed with the quality of them. I think that's all. Does anyone want to add anything? But since you managed to address those in your project, I was thinking of other people wanting to do similar work.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your contributions there, and for some feedback of the session. I know we are running over slightly, so unless there's any more questions, or I mean, you can contact each of the organisations separately, or us, if you want to, you know, further the conversation. But we just want to say thank you to all the presenters, and thank you to the conference organisers for inviting us this afternoon to spend some time with you. It's been really interesting and emotive as well. I know that kind of feeling thing, I know through the Peterloo project, it did evoke a lot of emotions for people when you're talking about, you know, these histories where people are protesting or people are killed for their beliefs. So it's really, really important work that these stories are told, and that people, particularly children and young people, can respond in their own way with the support from organisations that hold young people at the centre of what they do. And I think that's really important. And also around creativity, and how using creative processes can really help people to tell stories, hard stories, and how young people have really sort of responded to that in a positive way. And hopefully these kind of projects leave a legacy with people, and in 10-15 years time, hopefully these young people will be the next generation of people who promote voices. So yeah, so thank you so much everybody for coming this afternoon. It's been really great to share some insights with you, and thanks to the organisers again, and enjoy the rest of the conference, which we it's now almost coming to an end, but it's been amazing, so thank you very much.
And can I thank you, Karen, and for all the team who spent time putting this together, and also to remind people that those resources are available on the Manchester Histories website, including, I think, the short film as well about Peterloo, if you want to see that again, or if you want to use it in some way in your teaching. Maybe some of you are already doing something like this, but I know Manchester Histories is very, very keen to make international contacts. So if anybody wants to link in any way, please do, either via Karen or via the website. We would love to see that extend. I know Peterloo might sound like a very local event, but there are all sorts of events that can be used in similar ways to create similar resources. So thank you, Karen, very much indeed for giving us your time. I know how busy you are, so on a Saturday afternoon, that's brilliant. Thank you. And Liz and Naomi as well. Thank you very much indeed. Have I missed? Oh, and Hattie, where's Hattie? Let's see, Hattie as well. Thank you, that's brilliant.